Hello, everyone. This is John Tarr, and he is interviewing his grandson, Justin Tarr. Um, Welcome to Jaws Christ Talk special. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Christ Talk special on July 15th, 2023. Today we have Justin Tarr with us. Special thanks to Wingate TV, Transform You Media, Zach with Back Channel, and Jay Stoyan with the Disability Channel for hosting our shows. Please be sure to share and subscribe our page or wherever you found this. Now let's get to the show. Okay, this is my grandson Justin, and he's got a degree in theology. And I've been interviewing him on a lot of different things. Today, actually, is going to be a little different. We're going to talk about is there um, is there money in heaven? And so I'm going to go straight to Justin because I'm trying to figure out what that means exactly. Is there money? Dollar bills, $5 bills, $100 bills, or something else that they're using for um, exchange. So, Justin, could you explain to us what is there money in heaven?
Yeah, so I guess it really is just that simple. Is there money in heaven? Now, I am inclined to think there is not going to be any $1 or $5 bills in heaven. um, I I think the way of the dollar is going. Um, I don't think there's. I don't think we're going to have the $1 or $5 bills much longer, even on this side of glory. But
Okay,
I am definitely more bearish when it comes to the US dollar and bullish when it comes to gold and silver and the rest. So, but with everything in the economy, I thought it was an interesting question. Well, is there money in heaven? Because the question is, the next question we have to ask is what exactly is money, right? What like the song, right? Money, it's a hit. How does that go? Remember the
right.
song? So, what exactly is money? Well, money, original purpose of money was to facilitate trade because bartering is just inefficient. You have chickens, I have goats, you want oranges, I don't have oranges. How do I get, how do I get the thing you have when you don't want the thing I have? The money became that way of trading. It started off with just commodities like things like salt and the like, but eventually we needed something something that was more rare, and that's where gold and silver came in, is to help us facilitate that trade, so that way I could sell my goats or sell my cows for a certain amount and get something that someone else wanted, or get something that I wanted that someone else had because they didn't want my goats and my cows, but they're perfectly happy with my gold and my silver. And that eventually becomes fiat currency, as history goes, and then fiat currency just is just pieces of paper. They're IOUs. So really, money, because money in a lot of ways started as they started as gold coins, right? The gold coin was, its value was itself, the intrinsic value of it. When they replaced it with just pieces of paper, well, then money got turned into debt, right?
Right.
Paper is as good as gold, right? Because you can take it and you can turn it in for 1 ounce of gold, $1, 1 ounce of gold backed money, or have a silver backed dollar. And so there's that change, there's that ability to exchange your currency, or exchange your gold for currency. And there's that pinning to the dollar that we had until, of course, Richard Nixon famously, temporarily, for wartime effort, temporarily took us off the gold standard. And that temporariness has lasted the last 50, 60 years.
Right.
So,
Right.
so money is in many ways just a form of debt. You have crystallized debt in your hand that you can reuse for other things. So the question is there going to be any sort of money? Is there going to be any sort of currency to help facilitate exchange in heaven? Well, I don't know, because the Bible talks a lot about treasure in heaven and that there's going to be an inequality of it, right? And
Good
so,
point.
and if we have items, if we have different possessions, then it's going to be hard to tell how will that trade. Is there going to be trade in heaven? What do you think, Grandpa?
I don't know. What do we what does one because we're going to be saints there and we're going to be dealing with angels also. Will we have something a different type of person in heaven will want? So how will we exchange it? How will we give it? Um, I think the main question is, will we give it freely or will we charge um, other individuals, other souls that are in heaven? Um, so I'm not sure. What do you think? What do you think? Do you think we will have something that other individuals in heaven will want, that we will want to make an exchange with?
I think it's
Um,
I think it's very possible. So I'd say from the beginning, I'd like to go to the Bible as our source for things and talk about money. Jesus
right,
liked to talk about money a lot. He used it in his parables many times. The Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and the rest has a lot to say about money in general and what is money and how does it interact with things and what are bad uses of money. And then maybe we can talk about what's money's purpose for teaching us things, like what is God's purpose for money. So I'd like us to start off with just like I got a bunch of different verses up here, and the first one I wanted us to read through is the parable of the talents. Right? I know a lot of people, and I know myself included in the before I started, I guess, reading the Bible more, was I had the sort of opinion that everyone will have everything in common, and that heaven would essentially be a giant communist utopia, basically what communism always tried to be, except it'll actually the idea is like, oh, well, communism's great except human nature. Well, human nature's cured, so now we could have communism. That was sort of the thinking that I had for a very long time. And I think one of the better verses to really to first attack this idea that there's any sort of equality of finances in heaven is not true. And I think the one of the better ones is the parable of the talents. Um, and so for it will be like this is Matthew 25 verses starting on verse 14. I always use the ESV version. For it'll be like a man going on a journey. He calls his servants to trust him to his property. To the first one, he gave 5 talents. To another, he gave 2. Another to 1, according to his ability. Right. So God gives to us according to our ability and what He expects us to steward. Right. He's going to give little to someone who can't do very much. He meets us where we're at, which is great. He doesn't
right,
expect more from us than we could actually give him. And if he does give us more than we can handle, it's because he's supposed to step in, right? Or so he gave. So the one who had 5 managed to turn it into another 5, so he doubled his. So the same story with the one who had 2, he doubled his to 2. Verse 18, but he who had received 1 talent went and dug it in the ground and hid his master's money. So he was scared of the master, and he explains himself later. Now, after a long time, the master comes, and the servants came and settled their accounts, because the master gave out a debt to each one of them, told them to steward it well. He's looking to see what they did with it. How did they steward his investment? It'd be like we have like traders nowadays, professional traders and investment portfolios that people can go to, a trading firm and say, hey, I want to invest $10,000, please trade it. So it's sort of like he went to 3 different, investors and told them all to invest his money. And so he says, well done, my good and faithful servant, to the one who multiplied 5, the one who multiplied 2. But then he comes to the one who didn't multiply it at all. He just took it, buried it. And that happens inside of verse 4, he who also received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping what you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So first of all, the servant, the smaller servant, accuses God of or accuses the master of saying, hey, you go and you reap things you didn't reap, and you're going and just gathering things that you didn't do. I knew you to be a hard person, you're a harsh man. And that's the criticism that he gave. But the what's interesting is the master is always, the top dog of every parable is always God, right? The king's always God, the master of the house is God. And so in this parable, the father, God would be in that position. He would be the master who sows what he did not reap. And that criticism is not rejected in the parable. Jesus accepts that premise, which is very interesting in my opinion. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So he tells him, you wicked and slothful servants. So first of all, he calls them evil and lazy. You can't,
Yeah.
God doesn't want you to sit on the investments he gives you. If he gives you the ability to teach and you're not teaching, well, now you're burying your talent. You are, if you're able to run, you need to be the best runner you can. God gave you your talents, not just to bury them all because you're scared of him. First, so he calls him first, you wicked and slothful servant. You knew what I reap, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and I gather where I have scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. And so his criticism is basically, you're telling me that you think that I don't reap what I have sown. And he tells him, well, if you're really that scared of me, then you should have gone and invested in someone else. And so it'd be like, if you're a great, you're a great keyboard player, you can play piano really, really well, and you don't really think that you can make anything of it, but then you're not going to at least go and teach someone else your skills in order to, take your skills and, invest them into other people. At least they'll do something with it for the Lord. His criticism is like, you should have at least taken them somewhere. You did nothing with them. And so eventually, what he does is he takes the talent from the servant who did nothing with it, who's lazy and wicked, and he gives it to the one who multiplied 10 talents, because he trusts that servant a lot. There are servants God trusts with more, and servants God doesn't trust with anything, because he trusts them with so little, and then can't even do anything with that little. Their cowardice overcomes them. And so he tells them to cast this wicked, worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And before that, verse 30 and verse 29, he gives one of the scarier verses in the entire Bible. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have abundance. But to the one who has not, even what he has will be taken. And Jordan Peterson, a psychologist, said aptly recognized what's called the Pareto principle in that idea. This 80-20 rule, the idea that things tend to aggregate into minorities. The ones who have a lot, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Jesus is saying exactly that here. The rich, they're going to get richer. The poor, they're going to get more poor. And he doesn't say that's a bad thing. He says that's just the way it's going to work. And there are reasons for that. But what I found also interesting is that the master never denies that he reaps what he didn't sow, right? And God reaps what he didn't sow. Remember, the enemy is the one who sowed us out. We're wild olive trees. Now God is going and taking those olive trees and grafting them on to, be domesticated olive tree. And that's what Paul talks about in Romans, and I think it's like chapter 9 or 10 or 11 or something like that. And so I found that very interesting that the master never denies that he reaps what he didn't sow, because that's exactly what God does. God is a conqueror. As far from God's perspective, these people, these demons and spiritual forces are illegitimate already. They've they tricked Adam into giving up his birthright, and so and then Babel went to a mess, and then they neglected their leadership and allowed themselves to be worshipped, and so and then Jesus has now died and reclaimed ownership, and they haven't given up the land. From God's perspective, they're squatters. So he's like, okay, well, I didn't sow this, I'm owed it, I'm going to just take whatever's worth taking. It's sort of like a bank who finds a house that a house needs to be foreclosed on, so they just go and start repossessing things. Essentially, God is going and repossessing the land. That's what it is. It's a repossession.
Wow. Wow.
So there is there is a quality in the gifts that God is giving out, and that's by design. And we know that's by design even in perfect scenarios too, because we see all the way back in the end of the very end of the Bible in Revelation 22. It's talking about the restoration of all things, restoration of Eden, the consummation of the Lamb and the church. We have the consummation of all things, and there's a new heaven, a new earth. Everything's come together. And at the very end, in an epilogue, Jesus says, "Look, I am coming soon. My reward is with me, and I will give to each person according to what they have done." And that's verse
Yeah.
12.
So by saying that, what is that reward? I think we're so concerned with just making it into heaven. There's times that I feel like I'll make it into heaven, but my rear end is going to be singed
Yeah.
because I just barely made it into heaven. But what is the treasure that he's talking about? What are we going to get on that end? So I wonder what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it reminds me of people fleeing to America. There are a lot of middle class people in other countries who see their governments starting to fail, their economy starting to fail, and they sell everything they have to come here, even if it means crossing the border illegally and interacting with some very very evil people just to get here. And I think a lot of Christians have that same sort of mentality when it comes to getting to heaven. It's just like, all I need to do, I just need to get there with at least the clothes on my back. And hey, fair enough, but the paradigm God's got is not just you just need to get over the border. He's talking, God's talking a lot more long term than that. He says, you need to not store up treasure on earth, store up treasure in heaven.
Right.
Because if those people, for example, would have been potentially investigating in America prior to coming, when they sold everything and came here, they would have some investment waiting for them. And so there is a lot of wisdom in having a diversification of currencies. You want some U.S. dollar, you want some Mexican peso, you want some European euro, some Japanese yen. You want to have a diversity of
In
different.
other words, have a diverse portfolio.
Exactly. And King Solomon talks a lot about this in Ecclesiastes 11. He goes through this. He says, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days." And that's a very difficult to translate verse. But a lot of times people tend to take the position that it's talking about sending grain on shipments out from from your port city and making money through sending all of your sending your bread upon the waters to go make trade, and then you'll find it after many days. And he says to diversify to at least seven, which he's very Jewish minded. There's a lot of a heptadic structure inside of the book of Ecclesiastes. This is one of those areas. Give a portion to seven or even to eight. So he's saying seven, completeness, completely diversify, or even eight, meaning, and then go one step after that, right? You have completeness of
Yeah.
seven,
Yeah.
and go after this. So completely diversify in everything. And he says, give to seven, give to eight, or even eight, for you do not know what disaster may happen upon the earth, right? Who cares if you have a bunch of gold and silver? What if food's the only thing that really matters? What happens if you have a whole bunch of food and when maybe it's oil that people are needing because they can't travel from point A to point B to actually move that food. So we never know where the scarcity is going to be. He goes
Right.
on, if clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. If a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, it's going to lie, which sound like a bunch of truisms. But then he concludes the thought saying, he who observes the wind is not going to sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. Basically meaning, if you're constantly scared to invest your investments, you're never going to invest ever. Someone who's scared to oh no, it might rain, I'm not going to go camping, and then it doesn't rain, well, then they just missed out on going camping because they were watching the weather. If they constantly put off making those investments because they think, oh well, why should I buy a house, the economy is going to get worse, housing is going to plummet, maybe I shouldn't buy a house. And so I've known family, good friends who have put their lives on hold because they have a bunch of medical debt that they can't pay, and they're worried about that, and as a result they're putting off starting a family. And Solomon's saying, you that's diversify to mitigate your risk, but you can't, that by mitigating your risk and diversifying your investments is what is going to allow you to live a free life, to going off and doing other things. You don't have to worry about having only one asset, and that's especially hard to do inside of when you only have so many things. But he's also talking about disasters. Heaven, to get back to our original question, heaven's not going to have big disasters, but there still might be weather. Are we going to claim that it's never going to rain ever again? There are nice things about rain. We're going to have physical bodies in heaven. Am I never going to get sore moving around things, because it's the soreness in my muscles that makes massages feel so good? I don't know what it's going to be exactly like in heaven, but we have some ideas, and money is a big one. Money really teaches us a lot about investing, what it means to invest, and how economies work. So I've been talking a lot. Do you have anything to add before?
No, it's a very interesting subject, and one that not many people touch upon, but it's talked about many times. So I'm glad we're doing that, going into this area. When it comes to surviving and living, I do remember a teaching right after Jesus died that the early church actually lived together. So you were talking about communism. I don't think it was really considered communism, or especially in that day and age, that's not a word that was really brought up, but the concept was good. Ananias and Sapphira obviously were kind of the well-off people in the group, and they lied about how much fortune they had or kept when they sold some of their land. They kept some of it,
and
but didn't.
and it wasn't
Go ahead.
the issue was not that they kept it either. The issue was that they lied about the fact that they kept it, that they were going for the appearance of righteousness.
Oh, okay.
Right. And
Yeah,
so
so that would go along with when they talk about prayer and doing this in your prayer closet, and don't pray so everybody in the congregation can hear you. So that's along those lines. Then is that
yeah.
what you're saying?
Yes, and so and to get to your verse, they had all things in common. This happens in Acts 4. I just brought it up. Acts 4:32 through 35. Now the full member of those who believed were of one heart and one soul, and no one said that any of the things that belonged to him was his own, and they had everything in common. Just like actual communism, it's just public property. Everyone owns this thing. With great power, the apostles were given their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. The great grace was upon them all. There was not a needy person among them, for as many were as owners of land or houses sold them and brought them the proceeds of what was sold and laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each that they had. And so then we
Yeah.
get to the story of Ananias and Sapphira. What they did is they did the same thing. They saw everyone else selling their property and giving it, so they did the same thing, but they held some back, and then they claimed, oh, we're doing what everyone else did. We sold our place and gave you it. They didn't mention the holding back some of the proceeds part, right? And what was the reason that they wanted to do that? Well, they wanted the
Yeah,
reputation of it, right?
yeah,
They wanted
yep,
to look
yep.
like they were.
Well, also along these lines here too is we know that in practice, communism or socialism sounds very good, but in practice, and you can tell by the collapse of the Soviet Union and things like that, if people don't have a certain amount that belongs to them, they need to have an impetus to create or do things for themselves. So I think that's what communist China finally came to realize. Also, that's why they have allowed uh, capitalism, certain amount of capitalism within their boundaries of their country, but they're still communists. How do you get people to be motivated? So
Yeah, and
it's
you said something that I've heard a lot of conservatives say that is just not true, and that's is that communism sounds nice and sounds good, but it just doesn't work in practice. And the issue with that is that communism doesn't sound good. Communism on its face, just philosophically, is evil. It denies multiple of the Ten Commandments, such as don't covet thy neighbor's ass. It denies the rights of private property, even though it says that the church had all things in common. Jesus very specifically said that he'll give to each person according to what they have. And we just talked about the parable of the talents, how God is going to entrust different people different amounts. And so people will still have their, different measures of property. They're going to be unequal, and they won't have things in common in the way that we tend to think of them. So one thing that really turned me away from the idea of communism, of public property, is um, is that I realized that charity and generosity was philosophically impossible under such systems, because if you do not pay your taxes, they will they'll put you in a cage with predators, and then you will be locked in that cage for the rest of your life because you didn't pay your taxes. That's how they get a lot of major criminals, is they get them on tax evasion and the like. So taxes are inherently coercive. You can't coerce generosity, otherwise it loses generosity. It loses the definition of it being generous. If someone points a gun at you and says you're going to give $100 to this homeless person, well, you didn't do anything moral. Even if you wanted to give the $100 to the other person, and second the gun's pointed at you, well, it's changed the context of the situation, wherein it's coercion. Even if you agreed with the person pointing the gun that the homeless man needed to have 100 of your dollars. Because you're no longer doing it freely, you don't have the option to do alternatively, otherwise you get this punishment. So communism and socialism, that the mandate of forcing people to have things in common is inherently evil. It denies, you can't steal something if everyone owns the same thing. There's no such thing as theft in such a system as that. And mankind
well,
can get theft if everyone owns everything. And
well,
so
don't we do that to some degree in this country with some of our government programs that we've got to distribute the wealth, the
yeah,
Great Society that Johnson brought up, and then we have given trillions and trillions of dollars since the 1960s to the poor people in this country, but it has just caused um, a lot of people that get the income um, to have an attitude of thinking they're entitled to
mhm,
something.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and these entitlement programs are all built off of that fundamental misunderstanding of how generosity and compassion works. The second that it is a that you introduce coercion into the equation through taxation, um, and thus the enforcement of taxation. You've destroyed generosity. You've destroyed any sort of altruistic giving. There is no such. It doesn't. It philosophically is irreconcilable, and so that's what pushed me away from it. So what we have in Acts with the church is the reason it was written is in many ways to show that the church was doing by faith naturally the responsibilities that were intended to the temple. Right, the temple was meant to take care of widows and the poor and the needy. The temple was supposed to be doing these things and then providing for its priests. The church is now doing those things that the temple and the old guard have basically been neglecting. And now the church is doing it on their own, but they're doing it freely without any coercive act, without any taxation, without anything levied against them. They're going and giving freely of their own possessions and giving it out and allowing anyone to use it. That's why it's generous, and that's why they're commendable for doing it. But if God said, if you do not do this, then uh, I'm gonna just nuke you like he did Ananias and Sapphira, then it's coercion, and now it's a tax, and now it's no longer a free thing. That's why it's not that they held back proceeds. The problem is not that they held back proceeds. The problem is that they tried to invent their own money. So to the question, is there money in heaven? The answer is yes, but also no. Not money in the way we think of it, but more in terms of reputation. Ananias and Sapphira tried to fabricate fake money, money to try to fabricate fake reputation. I'm willing to do things for free for some people, and I'm not willing to do things for free for other people because they have a different reputation with me, right? I'm not going to charge if the Apostle Paul walked through my door and or Moses or Elijah walked through my door and I somehow knew supernaturally it was Elijah. And he said, God brought me, took me up and now he brought me down. And he said, you, Justin, you have to take, you're going to be taking care of me while I start my ministry in Phoenix. The prophet Elijah, right from Kings, if he did that, I would be crazy to be like, okay, well then, you're going to have to pay $800 a month rent. Like, charging the prophet Elijah rent, that'd be crazy. He would just get in by his reputation. And that's that, quote, money, that's going to be the currency in heaven. There's going to be that reputation. Ananias and Sapphira tried to basically charge a premium on their currency exchange. They tried to convert the currency of the world into currency of God, and they lied about how much they actually did. And so in that currency exchange, they were using unjust weights, because what they used to do, they used to put gold on one side, and then weights on the other, and then they would weigh it out to see if it actually lined up. But you could, inside of that weight, you could adjust it so that way it was heavier than it actually was. So that way you can charge people more gold. You can say, hey, look, it's an ounce, when really this is like 2 ounces because you added more weight to that weight to make it look like it was make it look like it was smaller than it actually was. And so you can cheat people out using fake weights. And Proverbs talks about how this is, obviously lying and cheating. That's what Ananias and Sapphira are doing. They got to the currency exchange and then they were using fake weights, and they were trying to get more of a reputation amongst the church in the early church. When everyone was giving to come and everyone was being generous, they were trying to get more of that than they were due because they lied and didn't want to give up everything. The problem was not that
very interesting. When you talk about giving, where was it the man was walking on a road and there was a disabled or a beat up person, and I forget what they call this parable, but it talks about. Go ahead.
The parable of the Good Samaritan, yeah.
Yeah, a good Samaritan. And the fact was that he wasn't even really a Jew in that sense, and he was helping a Jew apparently, and he took him to the end and wanted him to heal and everything, and then said, if I didn't give you enough money, let me know. So that is an interesting parable on many levels.
Mm-hmm.
On especially giving. This was a personal giving because a lot of people pass this individual up,
Yeah.
but he did not. And he stopped. He gave of his finances, but he also gave of his time.
Yeah.
Because if he was having a meeting coming up, he was probably going to be late. But I just find this that an interesting parable on touching on a couple of different things here. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, and Proverbs 11:25 talks about that. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and he who waters will himself be watered. You know, it's just like Solomon said, it's important that we invest, but Jesus, brings this to the next stage, if you will. Jesus tells us, don't lay up treasure or on the earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for treasure in heaven, right? So he's juxtaposing heaven and earth. There are different kinds of treasure: heaven of the earth, or treasure of the earth, treasure of heaven. But the treasure of heaven doesn't have the same liabilities and risks as the treasure of earth. It has neither moths, so we don't have to worry about moths breaking in and destroying it. There's no rust, so that I don't know exactly how there is no oxidation of iron in heaven, but apparently that's the way. Um, so different kind of treasure, right? Jesus is talking about a different kind of treasure. Moths can't eat reputation. Rust can't eat your reputation, and thieves can't break
right?
in and steal your reputation. They can try. They can try to slander you, um, but God is going to vindicate everyone's reputation. So they can't. And so he says the eye is
Right.
the body, and if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full. Well, that's a Hebraism. If your eye is healthy, and it's basically saying it's a Hebraism for if your eye is generous. If you're seeing things and you're seeing them through the lens of a good way of thinking, you're seeing things of like, oh, this isn't, they have um, they are paying let's see, maybe they're struggling in some way. You wouldn't see, oh, they're struggling. You wouldn't go, oh, I can take the last bit of money they have. You're saying, oh, they need a little bit more money in order to make ends meet. It's like that kind of thing. In what way are you seeing situations? If your eye is full of darkness, if your eye is bad, your whole body's going to be full of darkness. If light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness, right? That's why he's lamenting over wickedness. He just takes a moment to lament over wickedness, and then he finally closes it with, you can't serve two masters. You will either hate one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. And then he finally says, you can't serve God and money, right?
Right.
Money is just a store of value, as we talked about in the beginning. It's just a method of facilitating trade, when before there was bartering, which was very inefficient for people to be able to get what they actually want and need. Thomas Sowell defined an economy as a system of allocating scarce resources to have alternative uses, right? Lumber can go to houses, it can go to tables, it can go to fires, just, energy production. You can use lumber for a lot of things. Same with steel. Gold, you can use gold for electronics, you can use gold for stores of value. You can do different things with with the same resources. How do you choose how much you have? And so he defined a system of allocating scarce resources that have alternative uses. Heaven, there's no scarcity of food, there's no scarcity of light, there's no scarcity of water. There's only one thing in heaven, only one thing that's scarce, that can't increase, that's fixed, and is going to increase in demand across the infinity of time, and that is
And what is that? What is that?
that's people. The way in is narrow. There's only so many people that are going to go in. Moreover, there's going to be the tribulation saint class, and then there's going to be the church, similar to how there's the Levites and the rest of Israel. So there's only going to be so many people in the church, and there's only going to be so many saints in general that God's going to have. There's not going to be creation in heaven because people are not going to be given in marriage any longer. They're going to be like the angels in heaven. And so the population of God's image, the sons of God, is going to be capped, limited. It's the only thing that's going to be scarce in heaven. So because it's the only thing that's going to be scarce in heaven, we need a way of allocating those. And God is going to allocate those. That's what he says. He's going to allocate those people out, and how he's going to allocate people based off of their talents, how much he's given them as their talents. But he also is going to allocate them by their performance. That's the whole point of rewards. Rewards, are based off of merit and performance. It's meritus. God, I believe, it has a meritocracy, right? And that's why Ananias is so
Wow.
fired. And
That's very interesting. Very interesting.
Jesus actually tells us how to engage in this currency exchange. So the reason God is so harsh against money and so harsh against storing up treasure, God is not, against saving, right? A lot of people will read Luke 13, the parable of the rich fool, and he tells him the parable. A land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I'll tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store my grain and my goods. And I say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, and drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you've prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and not rich towards God. And that was the parable Jesus gave. And so a lot of people say that, well, Jesus is anti-retirement, Jesus is anti-savings, and it's no. Jesus is pro-savings, pro-retirement, but not on this side. He's telling you, don't, if you're going to save, don't save on this side of heaven. That's like me telling people, sell everything you have and get as much liquid US dollar as possible. It doesn't matter that inflation is going out of the roof and that everyone's about to divest from the dollar and with the BRICS nations, and that we're about to have a credit crunch, and that real estate and the commercial sector is actively crashing down to 90% like within the last 2 days. Doesn't matter about any of that. Go ahead and go buy as much US dollar as you can. That would be crazy. That would just be insane. Nobody's doing that. Nobody is doing that. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying there's going to be a fire. There's going to be a flood. No amount of gold, no amount of silver, no amount of any real estate is going to stop this train. This world is going to be destroyed just like it was in the days of Noah. Don't lay up treasure on an asset that's going to depreciate with 100% certainty. Lay up for yourself treasures in an asset class that's going to last. That asset class is your reputation with other people. That's his whole point. You can't serve
Right.
God. Money is all going to die here, but you can put it through currency exchange. And that is what the parable of the dishonest manager is. Very weird parable where Jesus is commending the shrewdness of someone who does something wicked. Very peculiar, and he comments on it. And so the parable goes, he said to his disciples, there's a rich man who had a manager who charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. So the man was just frivolous. He was just buying stuff he didn't need to do. He was being inefficient, wasting possessions. So the rich man called the manager and said, what is this I hear about you? Turn up the account of your management. So give me your spreadsheets. You can't be manager anymore. I'm firing you. Give me an account of everything you had, right? And the manager said, well, what should I do? My master is taking the management away from me, and he was a corrupt manager, obviously, because he's wasting resources. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm too ashamed to beg. I've decided what I'm going to do. I'm going to go, when I'm removing my management, I'm going to make sure I'm taken care of. So summoning his master's debtors, one by one, he said to the first, how much do you owe my master? Oh, I owe 100 measures of oil. He said, okay, well, take your bill and quickly write down 50, right? So he gives them a discount. He starts cutting and slashing people's debt. And he did it again with another one with wheat, and from 100 down to 80. And then the master finds out. And the master, normally a picture of God, but the master commends the manager for his shrewdness. And then Jesus said, again, also commends him because, the picture is God, is always the master For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. So he criticizes the sons of light, and he criticizes the righteous, that they are not shrewd as the wicked. For I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous wealth, meaning gold, silver, US dollar, all the treasure of this world, so that when it fails, gold and silver, are the safest asset that there is. That's why I have a good amount. But even that will fail.
Yeah. I guess what its
Wait.
meaning is
Real fast.
be shrewd and make investments. Make investments. You just said what did you just say? Did you just say something?
Yeah, so he says, when make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they will receive you into eternal dwellings. Meaning, if you build up your reputation amongst these people, even if you were to get fired from your position, even if you had nothing, your relationship with these people will carry you through. If maybe you can't sit on someone's couch for longer than like a week or a couple days, right? But if you got, 60 friends and you manage to couch surf from one friend to another, for 1 week here, 1 week there, and then you just cycle through for 52 weeks, each friend, you're only staying at one friend per week, you will be taken care of. You will always be taken care of because you've made your reputation amongst these people. You'll have made friends by means of unrighteous wealth that will receive you into the dwelling forever. You're good. You're taken care of from that point on. And that's what Jesus was
Okay.
teaching. That the shrewd manager had the wherewithal to know that he needed to invest in people and how other people think of them. And Ananias and Sapphira thought they could cheat the system and thought just to get that heavenly wealth. They thought just to get the actual the reputation for it. They didn't really
Obviously,
try.
obviously, they paid the ultimate price.
Yeah,
Um,
the ultimate
but
price.
also, I was thinking, what was I thinking about here? We need to make investments and be shrewd on this side, but don't get carried away. Don't get carried away so that's the only thing you think about, because there is another realm and there's another destiny that we're going to have to deal with. So
Hmm.
be careful to sparse out what you invest here versus what you invest in the kingdom.
Hmm.
I think a lot of Christians actually get a lot of this confused. A lot of what we're talking about is confusing to a lot of people. And I think God's got to speak to people on a separate level. That's why He did parables for people to understand.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
this is a very interesting life that we lead here on this planet, and it always has been. So I'm glad we're discussing this. Before I go too far, um, Justin and I both write for an apologetic website, deeper thinking of Christian values and ideas. You can find us underneath my name is Two Measures Foolish, and under Justin's it says, "Is there money in heaven?" Justin, how did you come up with that name, Two Measures Foolish? Where did you get that for the apologetic website? What does that actually mean?
So the idea is that as Christians, we are foolish by the world's standards because we believe in Christ, and the cross is foolishness to those who don't believe. And we are also foolish because we know better, yet we continue to sin because we war against our flesh. And so, in two different ways, we are foolish, and God, by God's standards and by the world's standards, we are two measures foolish. We are, foolish squared.
Yes. I've always liked that name, and I designed the logo that kind of matched it out. But it really says a whole lot. And if you go to our website, we've written a bunch of different articles on a bunch of different things. Justin's um, His podcasts can be found on the blog off the website, and I've written different articles, what makes an atheist and various things. Because I was an atheist till I was 30 years old. And it just showed the progression of me finding the Christian worldview. A lot of things as an atheist, and I believed in evolution and stuff like that, just didn't make sense after a while. And once I accepted Jesus Christ into my heart and was born again, then a lot of the Christian worldview made sense to me. We live in our world today, we can see the chaos that's happening, and it's because we have strayed away from the Christian values in this country, and all the different crazy things that are happening, from transgenderism to gay to abortion. We're trying to make sense of what's happening on this planet. And God warned us that a time like this was going to happen. So it's just a little way for us to be able to try to explain the Christian worldview. And I really give thanks. Justin has really opened my eye on a lot of things, and we have a lot of discussions about different things. And we have a perfect family that has all this going on. Throw out a congratulations to Justin. Him and his wife Alejandra are expecting their first child at the end of August. So he is going to be a father, and his wife is going to be a mom. And my wife and I had three boys, and now we have seven grandchildren. And Justin is the oldest of our grandchildren. And I started talking about apologetics early in his life, and then he was able to share and go further with it with his aunt and his grandma, and even his dad. He picked up on a lot of things. So I really appreciate his view on things, because it may seem a little off kilter, but it really isn't. It seems that way, but it really isn't. The fact that he looks at an aspect or something different than the rest of us, and I kind of do it too. We look at it from a different perspective. So we have to enjoy and really praise God for the different perspectives of what different people have in our lives. If they don't agree with you, don't get irritated or mad. Just think of it as a different way of looking at a situation, because there are so many different directions that you can come from and look at something and say, "Wow, I never thought of that." And so that's what we're trying to do here on our podcast, and say, "Wow, how many of you been out there have thought about finances and heaven and all those investments and stuff like that?" So it hasn't happened very often. And so that's what we were trying to bring up today. How does this actually look? How does this kind of work? So I really appreciate Justin when he decided to come up with this subject matter. I was like, wow, that sounds interesting. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about this. So, is there anything else? We only have about 7 minutes here, 6 minutes. Is there anything else that you would like to touch on in our subject matter today, Justin?
Yeah, I would say the only other thing that we should think about when it comes to money is, I'd say, the elephant in the room, especially as we comment on the credit crunch and the slowly collapsing US dollar. We talked about how money is fundamentally a form of debt. It's this store of wealth that is an IOU for getting a real asset, was what it's become. So this idea of debt is really fundamental to money. People will put up securities, people put up pledges, and And borrowing money, it's very common for us to borrow money. Americans are very comfortable borrowing money, but the Bible has nothing good to say about debt. There is an exact zero amount of verses that say anything good about debt. They're all bad. Every single one of them says that it's stupid, idiotic, and foolish. Proverbs 7, I have a list of them. Proverbs 17:18. And one who lacks sense gives pledge and puts up security in presence of his neighbor. That's essentially saying never cosign, never ever cosign. Only someone who lacks sense does something like that. If you don't do that, you are senseless. The Be not one who gives pledges and puts security for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? Because that's what happens to people who go bankrupt, is they lose everything because their debts, their liabilities start to be more expensive than their assets. And then Proverbs 22:7, one of Dave Ramsey's most regurgitated verses, one of his favorite verses that he uses: the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Debt is slavery, definitionally. If you owe someone money, that money is only produced by working and your labor and your time, because that's what money represents. It represents time and labor to produce the asset. Right. That's why property, as John Locke defends, that's why property is a fundamental human right, because you had to put your time and effort into your land, into your property, and then that crystallizes as your property. When the government takes it with taxes, then they're stealing your time and your labor away from you. You do not have sovereignty over your own time and your own labor. That is definitionally what slavery is. And so you take that with debt. If you owe someone your time and your labor and it's not yours, you do not get to make the decision. Then you are that person's indentured servant. You are indentured to them. You owe them your time and your money. It's not even yours, so you're their slave. And a lot of people are willing to sign up to become the slave of the bank, or the slave of government if they take student loans. A lot of people are willing to sell themselves into slavery. We as Christians have had our debts paid. Why would we sell ourselves into slavery once again? We have one master. Whenever someone makes themselves to have a debt and another to someone else, they are having two masters. Now they have the bank as their master, and now they have God as their master. They will serve one and not the other. That's just the way it is. Because if you have a debt, you have to pay that debt, or even your bed's going to be taken out from under you. Jesus, he paid our debts. He fixed our reputation. We're no longer sinners before the Lord. Now we can stand clean. There's no reason to give up that freedom just for what? To have a house, have a piece of real estate or something, or an object on this side of heaven, when you should be investing in the next life anyways, because it's all going up in smoke. As Ecclesiastes says, everything is vapor. Don't invest in vapor. Anything you can buy with money is treasure of the world. You can buy sex, you cannot buy love. You can buy a wife, you can't buy a relationship. So that's all I want to. That's where I'll end it.
Well, thank you for that. There's a lot to digest here, and we'll probably go further next month, depending on the subject matter that Justin decides to talk about.
We're
I'm just, you what?
We're gonna do Job next. We're gonna do the big exception. What if you do everything right and it doesn't go well? So we're gonna do Job next.
Yeah, because we gotta remember that this life on this planet is temporary, and we're really working for the goal, which is eternity. And how does that look like? How do we connect to that? Job's story is really big. So with that, I'm going to end up here. I'm going to finish up with us talking here. Thank you, everybody who was here with us on our next episode of John's Christ Talk special will be aired in August, when Justin will be back with us. Be sure to subscribe to our channel or page where you have found us, and check out the website to find out more about this and other shows. Until next time, we wish you a productive and enjoyable and a good investment on your time. So I just wanted to thank everybody. Thank you, Justin, for being on our program today, and we'll see you next month.